Everywhere you turn, people are talking about Ozempic or Semaglutide, or what is commonly known as a glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist. Let me give you a quick breakdown of what this is. The good news is it looks as though different styles of diets can influence natural levels of GLP-1 or semaglutide in our body. So maybe we don't have to turn to this thing that's getting kind of sketchy. Now, GLP-1 receptor agonists, these are what emulate or simulate sort of glucagon-like peptide. What is glucagon-like peptide 1? When we eat food, our natural response is to have a messenger from the gut send a signal to the brain, and this is glucagon-like peptide 1. When it sends this signal to the brain as a messenger, it signals a various forms of cascades of things. So you have triggering the pancreas to produce insulin. You have all kinds of signals that tell you not to eat more. So obviously huge, and that's why it's so big in like Hollywood right now, is people are just taking it because it makes it feel like you don't have to eat. But the reality is that semaglutide is really designed for people that have metabolic issues, that do not manufacture fuel properly, people that cannot utilize glucose properly, or insulin resistant, or diabetics. It's kind of being a little bit abused, even though it's a cool compound, and I'm not gonna lie, I've been curious to try it, but I haven't. I just don't have a need for it. So how can the Mediterranean diet influence this? Well, what's interesting is that the diversity of foods in the Mediterranean diet produce a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate. Now, butyrate is a byproduct of the fermentation of fibers in our gut. So if we eat, let's say in this particular case, asparagus or artichoke, which are very high in inulin, which ferment very heavily in our gut, they produce a lot of this butyrate. Now, butyrate in itself is a signaling device. It can do all kinds of things that are tremendous for us. But we've also now seen that butyrate increases glucagon-like peptide 1 levels. Not to the same degree as if you were to utilize semaglutide or Ozempic, but over the long haul, probably a fairly commensurate amount. It almost restores you back to healthy levels. What's interesting is there was a study that was a meta-analysis that took a look at 28 different studies. And when they looked at these 28 different studies, they analyzed the Mediterranean diet. And they found that every single one of these Mediterranean diet studies showed an increase in glucagon-like peptide 1. So it increased this gut incretin, and that correlated significantly with the level of satiety and insulin sensitivity that's associated with the Mediterranean diet. How can you get these benefits, even if you don't want to go full-blown Mediterranean? Well, the first things that we can do is we focus on our microbiome. Okay, that's like the biggest piece. And I say it's the biggest piece because that's where we have the most data. If we can have a more diverse microbiome and we ferment more fibers, we produce more butyrate, and we have higher glucagon-like peptide 1 secretion. This is gonna trigger the pancreas to produce more insulin, lowering our glucose levels, and it's gonna trigger us to be a little less hungry. So by focusing on diversity of the microbiome, by eating more fibers, by utilizing good probiotics, things like that, we can have a huge impact. When you're first making changes to your diet and adding more fibers in, I usually do, it's like one of the only times I recommend adding a probiotic in. Most of the probiotics are garbage. I popped the link down below for the one that I use since people ask me all the time. It is called Seed. It's what's called a symbiotic. So it has prebiotic fibers and a probiotic. So it's a capsule inside of a capsule. So when you start adding more of these fibers in, like the artichoke, the asparagus, the onions, the garlic, the things that kind of give you a little bit of gas at first, you usually do want to couple that with a probiotic so that you're actually growing as many species as you possibly can. So you get the maximum diversity bang for the buck. So anyway, that link down below will save you 15% off if you want to try it out. You can use whatever probiotic you really want to. That's just the one that I recommend because it's the only one that doesn't have a bunch of nonsense and actually has science behind it. So again, that link is in the top line of the description just below this video, and it's for 15% off. So it's called Seed. That link is down below. What's interesting about semaglutide is that most people think it's there to be like an appetite suppressant. That is not really the main use case for GLP-1 receptor agonists. It's usually for people that have glucose issues. And one of the reasons that it helps this is because it allows the pancreas to produce more insulin. Now, why is this so good? Isn't insulin bad? Insulin's not bad. We need insulin. It's very important. It's probably one of the most important peptide hormones in our body. But what we do face is that if you are insulin resistant, then the body just keeps producing more and more and more, and you have chronically high levels of it. What GLP-1 receptor agonists can do, and by having more GLP-1, is you allow the pancreas to produce a larger pulse of insulin at the right time to allow glucose to get into the muscle. But what's interesting about the Mediterranean diet is it also takes the pressure off of the pancreas because of some of the foods that you're eating, the polyphenol-rich foods that have high amounts of quercetin, so onions, shallots, capers, you name it. Anything that's got high amounts of quercetin. Quercetin can increase AMPK in the skeletal muscle system, which ends up making it so that glucose can suck into the muscle cell without having to have insulin present. That's right, you can suck glucose into a cell, lower your blood glucose levels without ever producing insulin. So when you look at a diet that is rich in these polyphenols and rich in flavonols like quercetin, you get bang for the buck without having to even ask anything of your body in the first place. Now, the last thing we have to focus on is GLP-1s seem to improve inflammation in certain ways. One of the reasons that they might do this is just by limiting the amount of glycation that's happening. If glucose levels are lower because someone's taking semaglutide, then you have less oxidative stress, less glycation, less damage, cellular damage, protein damage. That totally makes sense. So if the Mediterranean diet can do this in different ways, then that's even more phenomenal, right? One of the ways that the Mediterranean diet does this is, again, by having a diversity of fibers, you end up with more of this butyrate, the same thing that produces or helps stimulate GLP-1. This butyrate feeds the cells within our gut, and it causes these junctions to tighten up. What happens when these gut junctions tighten up is you have less metabolites and less pathogenic material leaking into the bloodstream, causing chronic inflammation. So naturally, your inflammation levels go down. So we have to look at this from a multi-pronged approach. Do you go and you just take semaglutide to get the weight off? Well, you absolutely can. I think it's a very effective compound. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say who should go on and who should not. But I do think that you do the most with the least first. So here's what you do. Here's what you add to your diet. Artichokes, you add asparagus, you add any kind of fiber like chia, like flax, it's more of a soluble fiber. But anything that's gonna have a high amount of inulin, even apples have a fair bit of inulin. Okay, that's going to be the fiber that's gonna be really good for the gut. Make a concerted effort to do that. Maybe reduce your saturated fat content down to about 20% of your total fat intake. So if you consume 100 grams of fat per day, maybe limit it to about 20 grams of saturated fat. That leaves you with 80% of your fats being more polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats that could be a little bit better overall for insulin sensitivity. As far as protein is concerned, opt for the leaner cuts of protein. Makes it a little bit easier for your body to digest, and that way you're kind of having this whole ecosystem that's working in tandem like a Mediterranean style diet, even without going full-blown Mediterranean. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.